Hey YouTube, what is up? I was going to make a Salamangreat deck profile, but unfortunately Simo beat me to the punch on that one, so instead I decided to show you guys this. This is what I plan to play for the World's OTS event that is happening in the next 2 weeks here in the TCG and frankly around the world. It is going to be happening, I believe, August 10th and 11th, the Saturday and Sunday, depending on when your OTS wants to host it, and it is a very interesting event because it combines the TCG and OCG ban lists for a really wacky format. Now, it is not the most current TCG format, it is actually the prior one, which is kind of weird, but for some reason they decided to release the ban list before Worlds and then not incorporate it. But either way, we're still going to play it. So here we go. Oh, also another thing to note, you can't play Rising Rampage cards for some reason, kind of weird, but I do think you can play Battle of Legends cards, which is very important because then we can play a lot of cards that do help us out in the extra deck. So with that being said, let's bust into this deck profile. I play 3 Alistair the Invoker because it is a very strong card. It has a hand trap like effect where you can discard it to give a fusion monster you control 1000 attack and defense. Quick effect, you can use it in the damage step, which is very spicy. It is also not once per turn, so you can use all 3 if you happen to have all 3 in hand to give your fusion monster a boost of 3000 attack or defense. Very strong. It also has another effect where if you normal summon it or flip summon it, you can search an invocation, and that is the effect we're predominantly going to be abusing this time around. Invocation is a very strong card because it allows you to fuse with cards in your graveyard, your field, or your opponent's graveyard. I believe you can use your hand as well. Very interesting card. And on top of that, that gives us a lot of versatility with the hand traps that we play, because then we do have a lot of, I guess, double use. We can basically use a hand trap for free and then fuse with it on our first turn, which is our technically the second turn of the duel, and then try and push for an OTK from there. With that being said, I play 2 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring because it is at 2 in the OCG, but it is still a very good card, especially in these weird hodgepodge formats. A lot of decks are weaker to interruption, and that's why I play a whole hell of a lot of it. Ash Blossom Joyous Spring is a great card. We also have a fusion monster called Purgatrio, which we can abuse the shit out of by using Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring as a fusion material. Basically, Purgatrio has a pretty broken effect, and we'll get to that in a moment, but I play 2 for obvious reasons. I would play more if I could, but unfortunately I can't. Same thing for Pankratops. It's at 2 in the OCG, so we can't play 3, but it is still a free summon and free removal. We don't play back row removal in this deck, so as a result of that, Pankratops gives us some versatility where you can remove back row if we need to, and if not, we can just link away with it because it's a free summon, kind of similar to the Mekk-Knights. We do also have an Earth Fusion that we can abuse with this card, and I'll get to that in a second. We also play 3 Effect Veiler because it just negates monster effects and puts a light in our graveyard, and one of the best fusions for this deck is a light monster named Mekka. So the more light monsters, the merrier in my book. That's why we play 3 Effect Veiler. We also play 3 Ghost Ogre for a very similar reason. I feel like a lot of decks are weak to destruction and removal, especially in these weird formats like I mentioned before. Ghost Ogre obviously doesn't negate unless it's like a continuous trap or spell card or field spell, because those have to be face up on the field to resolve. But in terms of monsters, it doesn't necessarily negate, but it does get the problem card off the field most of the time. Hitting a card like Saryuja could be very strong. There's just a lot of different ways that this card can come up, and this format can be very varied, and I think a Ghost Ogre has good versatility for a lot of different matchups, so that's why I like to play it. We also play 2 Mekk-Knight Blue Sky, 2 Mekk-Knight Indigo Eclipse, and 3 Mekk-Knight Purple Nightfall, because these are the best Mekk-Knights, and I think this is the correct ratio to play for this deck. We do need level 8s for an Xyz monster we'll get to in a moment, but basically these cards are the most broken ones that you want to play. The other Mekk-Knights don't necessarily need to be played. This deck does have a kind of a focus on Indigo Eclipse because of the trap card that we play, but we'll get into that in a moment. But if you don't know what Indigo Eclipse's effect is, really quick, it just allows itself to quick effect move any Mekk-Knight you control to a different column. So you can actually free up space on your turn to summon another Mekk-Knight, or you can do something spicy with that trap card right there, and I'll get to that in a second. The next card we play is 3 Cyframe Gamma, because Gamma is negation and destruction, so it is like Ghost Ogre and Effect Veiler wrapped into one. Unfortunately, it does have to have Driver in the deck because of that, but it is just such a strong card. If a Psychic, these cards do have an inherent weakness in this deck. I do want to mention that it's because they do banish themselves from the field at the end of the phase, at the end phase, because this isn't really that great for the deck, but we do need negation and destruction, and there isn't a card that does it better than this card. We also play a Link monster that lets us abuse this card on our turn, and we'll get to that in a moment. We play 3 Instant Fusion because it is a card that we can set on our side of the field, and we can then summon a Mekk-Knight in the same column as that instant fusion. Very, very strong play. We can also then use instant fusion to summon a fusion monster. My two targets are Raijin, which is a quick effect, Book of Moon, or Thousand Eyes Restrict, which allows us to steal our opponent's monster and then just equip it as a spell, puts a card in a column. Very, very spicy. Instant fusion is just a generically good card in this deck. And even if we don't necessarily need the monster that we're stealing with Thousand Eyes to go away, we get to take an opponent's monster for free and then just push for an OTK from there. You link away the Thousand Eyes Restrict, obviously, otherwise you can't really attack. But it does give us some removal in a way that most people don't necessarily expect. We play 3 Invocation because it is broken at 3. I was testing it at 2, but at 3 seems to be a lot better. If you draw Invocation and Alistair, your OTK is a lot more consistent because you don't necessarily have to search or draw into another invocation later or try and do some weird plays with the Link 2 and Book of the Law. You get 2 fusion monsters on the board pretty much right away, and that is very, very strong. You could also set invocation, summon a Mekk-Knight, and then activate it. Just gives us more versatility with the columns that we aren't necessarily, a lot of people don't play around Mekk-Knights anymore, so they don't have to fear it, but some people might expect it in this format, and invocation just gives us a way to summon our Mekk-Knights in a column that our opponent might only have 1 monster in. Without any back row. We also play 3 Magical Meltdown because this card searches our Alistair, which searches our invocation. So obviously it's a very good card, but on top of that, it prevents your opponent from responding to fusion summons, which is really good. Instant fusion, unfortunately, does not count as a fusion summon. It's just a special summon, but Book of the Law is a fusion summon, which is very, very spicy, or it is at least counted as one, so they can't respond to it as well. It gives your monsters protection that they normally wouldn't have, and it just searches your Alistair, so why not play it at 3? We also play 2 Mind Control because it is just a free way to get an opponent's monster onto our side of the field. It's also a card, like I said, you could set to summon a Mekk-Knight with. Most people won't expect Mind Control, especially in Game 1. In Game 2 and 3, they might see it coming, and then you just side it out for different cards, especially if they force you to go first. But it is still a very good card, especially going second. You just link away a problem card, or you steal a problem card, and especially if you open this and Thousand Eyes, you're getting rid of 2 monsters on their side of the field, and you can just link them away into Lambda, which is kind of broken. We also play 1 Sky Striker Mecha Hornet Drones because this allows us to go into a free link 2 thanks to Engage, which searches that card out. You basically go Engage Hornets, Kogari, add Hornets back, and then you activate Hornets, make any link 2 you want. You can make the Mekk-Knight link, or you can make the Cyframe link, which is actually very strong in this deck as well. We play 1 Terraforming because that's all it is at in the OCG, even though I think TCG had it at 2 until this last ban list, but we're not playing with that ban list, but Japan still has it at 1, so we're going to play with it at 1. We play 1 Book of the Law because it is searchable, but if you don't know what this card does, it allows you to basically fusion summon any other invoked monster from your extra deck by just getting rid of a fusion monster you control on your field, which is very strong, and our link searches it out, so that's why we only have to play 1. We also play 1 World Legacy Secret. It is a continuous trap card, and it is searchable thanks to one of our link monsters. I'll get into that in a second. But what it allows you to do, you don't necessarily have to use the level 5 or higher special summon from your graveyard, although that can help, especially to get a Mekk-Knight monster back, in this case Indigo Eclipse. What it allows you to do is negate monster effects, or negate any opponent's monster effects that activate in the same column as a Mekk-Knight monster you control, and because Indigo Eclipse can move itself, you can negate multiple effects. Especially if your opponent has a card in that column and they can't move it and they're planning to activate the effect, you can put Indigo Eclipse in that column preemptively to prevent it from even being attempted, just in case they have some kind of destruction, maybe Ghost Ogre if you activate Indigo Eclipse. Very, very strong card, and it is searchable, which is why I like to play just 1 copy. I feel like 41 doesn't necessarily hurt this deck's consistency. I was testing Pot of Desires, but I didn't really like the way it worked for this deck, especially considering there's some cards that we have at 1 that we don't want to banish off Desires, like Book of the Law, which kind of really helps with our whole play. Terraforming, it searches your searcher, which searches your searcher, pretty broken. Anyway, onto the extra deck. We play 1 Invoked Megalancia, or Megalanissa. I don't know how to pronounce that card, but it is a 3,000 beater, and that's usually what you go into with the Book of the Law, because by that point your opponent probably doesn't have 3,000 life points left, and you just push for a shit ton of damage. We also play 1 Mekaba because that's what it's at in Japan. We're not necessarily using this card to control our opponent. We're mainly making this card just to prevent hand traps from hurting us. So you make this card, leave it on the field. Your opponent tries to activate a hand trap. You can ditch the Alistair that you used to fusion summon it with, because you could add it back off the invocation, and then you prevent them from stopping you, and you just keep pushing until you can OTK. We also play 2 Purgatrio because 1 is broken, but 2 is even more broken, especially considering that Kogari is a fire, Salamangreat has a lot of fires, Ash Blossom is a fire. There's opportunities where you can summon 2 of these. So I do like playing 2 Invoked Purgatrio. It's just a very, very good card in general. If you don't know what this card does, it can attack every monster your opponent controls once each, and it gains 200 attack for each card your opponent controls, and it also does piercing on defense monsters. So Salamangreat boards basically just get rinsed. Very, very strong card. We also play the one Raijin, like I mentioned before, as an instant fusion target. We don't play any wins in this deck, though you can play Drone Lock if you think it's like kind of necessary for the format. I might adjust this list once I go to the actual event and see what the people around me are building and attempting to play. But, you know, even without the Droll, I still think it's a mandatory card to play in the extra deck because you do play Instant Fusion, and Book of Moon is still pretty strong for a lot of cards. You can even Instant Fusion a Colossus, book it face down, and then you can do all your searching. There's just a lot of versatility for this card. I also play Thousand Eyes Restrict because it can steal your opponent's monster, like I said before, and then you can just push for an OTK through that. I play one Dingirsu because it only requires 2 level 8s, and our level 8s that kind of search and summon each other are right here. Not a bad play at all. Free removal, and you can just link it away past that point to push for even more damage. There's a lot of different ways you can go about the OTK in this deck, or even if you don't go for the OTK, you just have so much free removal with these cards that your opponent normally can't recover, and you just push for an OTK on the next turn. You can focus on removal for one turn and then pushing for damage on the next. After that, we play one Alistair, the Invoker of Madness. This card allows you to discard a card, search Book of Law, pretty broken. On top of that, you can use him as a regular Alistair, like the normal, monster we have right here. You can use him as that in the graveyard, and I think on the field, so you get an extra Alistair to fuse with to make a second invoked monster from your extra deck popping out onto the field. Most people kind of forget that actually, and they kind of link it away and they don't abuse it. But usually you just use this card to search Book of the Law and push for an OTK from that point. We play one BLS link because we are trying to OTK, and sometimes you don't have the ability to go into a Boral Sword, and this is like a mini Boral Sword. You can push for extra damage if you want. You can make it gain attack. You can banish a card. Pretty good. Just has good removal, and it's not necessarily as great as Boral Sword is, but sometimes it gets the job done. We do play the one Boral Sword because this card is OTK City, and it's not that hard to bring out, especially if you can, pull out a Lambda and then activate the Gamma that you search because of the Broken Comp we're going to mention in a second. Especially in 10 with Purgatrio, this just puts an immense amount of damage on the board. Boral Sword, I think, is kind of the heart and soul of this deck, and it's kind of what you need to OTK most of the time. And even if you can't get to it, there's other cards that we have, like the BLS link, that allow you to get there in not as an efficient way, but sometimes you have to make the plays that you have to do, even if they're a little neg. I still play Unicorn. I took Phoenix out because Unicorn has more beneficial arrows. Phoenix points upwards, which kind of hinders like what we're trying to do with this entire deck. Free removal, again, just by discarding a card, doesn't really matter to us. We can discard a card and then just fuse with that card that we discard. Puts a free fusion material pretty much in the graveyard for us, so it doesn't really matter all that much. And it has a zone that points down, which can help us summon out like a Purgatrio underneath it if we need to. We play one Mekk-Knight of the Morningstar. This card requires 2 monsters, including a Mekk-Knight. Doesn't have to be 2 Mekk-Knights. And when it's summoned, you can discard any other Mekk-Knight or World Legacy card and add a World Legacy card from your deck to your hand. You search this bad boy right here. And if you decide to leave him on the field, and then you pull out another Mekk-Knight, you have, especially Indigo Eclipse, you have the ability to negate monster effects in like 3 different columns, which is really, really strong. This is pretty much your going first play if you're forced to go first. Some decks might plan to OTK you too, so sometimes it's best not to just like, go past even though you have viable plays. And this is just one of the plays you can go into if you have enough Mekk-Knights to do so. We also play Psyframe Lord Lambda because this card is bonkers. It is a generic link too. You can activate Psyframe monsters from your hand even while you control face-up monsters while its cards in the field. And if a face-up psychic monster you control is banished face-up while this card, while you control this card, you basically get to search any card you want. So here's the spicy part, right? It says if you banish a face-up psychic monster. Let me scroll up right here a little bit. Oh, bam! What? That's a psychic? Whoa! That one too? Don't tell me. Ooh, these are all psychics. So if you actually manage to go into your Lambda and you keep a Mekk-Knight on the field and you banish the Mekk-Knight for a fusion, it gets even more broken. There's a lot of versatility with this deck, and there's a lot of usability. It is very, very strong. That's just the best way to put it. I think it's a really cool card. I think it opens up a lot of plays, especially with the Mekk-Knights. Yeah, I can't think of a better way to put it like that. Let me just read this real quick. Make sure I'm not telling you the wrong information. Banish from the field. Yep. So you just banish your Mekk-Knights from the field, search a Gamma, and then they try and do anything. You Gamma them while you control Lambda because it doesn't matter that you have monsters on the field. Pretty freaking broken. On top of that, I play one Almirage because this just puts your Alistair in the graveyard to give you more versatility and more bodies on the field. It also does point down, which is great for us. It says 1,000 attack or less, 1,000 attack or less right there. Basically puts it in your graveyard, allows you to get into further link plays. Let's say you normal summon the Alistair, search Invocation, make, this boy right here. Then you can activate Engage, search the Widow, and search the Hornet Drones, and you can get a free link 2 off that. Even with your Alistair Engrave, then you can fuse with the Alistair Engrave, and then you have a whole ton of plays. And this is a Fire 2, so you get a nice big old Purgatrio out of that nice play you just did there. And the last card we play is one Kagari for obvious reasons, because we are playing the Sky Striker package. So, with that being said, guys, there are some cards you can play in the side deck, but that's really dependent on the format that you're going into and what your locals is going to be playing. Cards like Gamma, Desires, you don't necessarily need to main them if you don't want to. You could side the Gammas if you prefer. You could play the Solemn lineup as a going first option. There's a lot of ways you can go about this, but I feel like this is something that you could tailor to your locals' needs, and that's why I kind of like it a lot. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about this deck. If you're planning on playing something similar, or if you're playing something completely different, let me know in the comments down below, because I'm interested to see what you guys are thinking for this interesting once-a-year format that we're going to be getting into. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up right there, and click subscribe because it's free, it's fun, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Also, I did start a Discord. There's one guy in it who I did play a couple of games with, but I'll put the Discord down below if you guys want to talk a little bit more, play some games on Dueling Book. Obviously, that's the the online dueling thing that I use. So, thanks again, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.